Hello everyone and welcome to Export Dharshana. Today we are going to talk about exports, imports, its importance, how it was during the pre-colonization, pre-independence and post-independence eras. Now what are exports? Any physical or non-physical good or service which is manufactured in one country but supplied to a foreign country is known as exports. Sounds simple, right? Now think of the silicon chips being used in your mobile phones or laptops. Now these are not manufactured in India, no. These are imported from other countries. Even though the United States consumes a very high quantity of coffee, majority of it is imported from other countries. So this begs the question, why can't India produce their own silicon chips, or why can't the United States grow its own coffee? Now to understand this, we need to first understand the importance of international trade. So to answer this question, we need to first understand two schools of thought. Sounds academic, right? I know, but it is very important to learn this. The first school of thought is called as the absolute advantage. This concept was developed by Adam Smith in his book The Wealth of Nations. So what exactly does it mean by absolute advantage? Any individual, company or a country is said to have absolute advantage when they can produce a good or service more efficiently than their competitors. Now let's take a look at an example. If the United Kingdom can produce 1 unit of cloth at 50 labor hours, while to produce the same unit of cloth, India takes 70 labor hours, then the United Kingdom has absolute advantage in the production of cloths. Now India might have an absolute advantage in the production of grapes when compared with the United Kingdom. So by exchanging or trading goods with each other, both countries end up with more of each good than they would have in the absence of trade. Now the United Kingdom uses all of its labor hours in the production of clothes and imports grapes from India, whereas India spends all of its labor hours in the production of grapes and imports clothes from the United Kingdom. Thus, each nation benefits by utilizing its resources on specializing in one product or several such products. Now, the second school of thought is called as the comparative advantage, and it was developed by David Ricardo in the year 1817. Now, comparative advantage is often viewed in contrast with absolute advantage, where absolute advantage refers to the ability of an entity to produce a good or service at a larger quantity. Comparative advantage refers to the ability to produce a particular product or service at a much lower opportunity cost when compared with the competition. A country is said to have comparative advantage when it can produce a particular product or service at a much better quality and at a lower cost when compared with its competitor. With this, now we can understand how countries involve themselves in international trade to make sure that the resources present in these countries are used more efficiently. Differences in technologies, resource endowments, differences in demand and supply, presence of scale economies and policies affect the decision-making process. Now in the modern world, not only the relationship between two countries matters, but the relationship with you-know-who also matters, well, sometimes. Now, why the Russian invasion of Ukraine affected the import decisions of Germany, or how it kind of enabled India to purchase oil at a much cheaper rate, makes you think why international trade is important. Now, the concept of international trade has more twists and turns than the Netflix series Dark. Factors such as foreign exchange earnings, foreign investments, high employment rate, work specialization, price stability, dissemination of knowledge, and interdependency in international trade matters a lot for the economic development of any country. India is called the land of diversified soil and climatic conditions. As the dialect changes every certain kilometer, even the weather and agricultural practices change. In Bangalore, the weather changes from Yelahanka to Koramangala. So let's understand how things were before the British Raj came to India, during and after. As widely known, Vasco da Gama first came to India, more precisely Calicut, in the year 1498, and this was the first time that a European had arrived in India through the sea. He was mesmerized with India's agricultural richness, and it was during this time that he met Zamorin, the regional king of Calicut. However, it is believed that it was Pedro Alvarez Cabral, another Portugal trader, who established the first trade relationship with India. He imported ginger, pepper, cardamom and cinnamon from India to Portugal. Well, we all know people got greedy and how India was colonized by the Portuguese, French, Dutch and even the British. Even textiles were one of the most important products during the pre-colonization era. During the 1800s, the trade policies of the British Raj did not encourage the interests of the Indian community as such. Majority of the policies was focused on development and support to the British Kingdom and not the colonized people of India. This had many adverse consequences on India's international economic relations. One of the biggest examples was levying higher duties on cotton textiles of 20% for all non-British imports, which is clearly being India, under the Cotton Textile Protection Act. This was identified as a fiscal necessity for the British Raj. During the 1840s and onwards, India was considered one of the biggest customers of Britain's Lancashire cotton industry. Other products imported to India included railway material, metal products, machineries, raw metals, etc. More than 90% of all India's imports in the 1900s was from the United Kingdom. Opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 also created a shorter route, which meant less time and reduced cost of transportation. Opium, indigo, sugar and raw cotton were some of the few products being exported out of India during the 1800s. Interesting thing was that the payment for all these trades was usually done through gold. Even though it is identified in literature that India was in export surplus during the British rule, it did not help the Indian community or the Indian economy to a greater extent. Since the trade was majorly with Britain, the gold or the money never reached India most of the time, and if it did, then these earnings were adjusted against the expenses of wars, salaries and other lavish expenses of you know who. Post-independence, India's approach towards foreign trade had some structural changes. 5-year planning period started and goals and targets were set in that direction. Even though with many policies and structural changes, the first 3 5-year plan periods saw high imports and fewer exports due to unfavorable balance of payment situations. During the 4th 5-year plan period, that is 1966-67 to 1973-74, India devaluated the currency, that is the Indian rupee, by 36.5%, due to which the balance of trade position got some favorable momentum and agricultural production had some positive momentum as well. The period of 1976-1977 saw some surplus exports due to the export of fish, coffee, tea, cotton fabrics and many more products. However, it was short-lived and we got into trade deficit during 1978. India is one of the biggest economies in the world right now. Foreign direct investments have been increased in pretty much all the sectors. India is a hub for startup unicorns of the world. Even though we are still trade deficit in merchandise trade, it is narrowing and India has trade surplus in the service sector. The value of trade has increased, global dynamics with India has changed positively, multilateral trades are happening and opening of new markets can be seen in the recent times. We should identify our strengths and increase exports in the non-service sectors as well. Better and efficient digitization of the export process would make it easier for exporters. Free trade agreements with developing Asian and African economies for our products would give a great momentum. Public export organizations should be easily accessible to the stakeholders of the supply chain. Export and logistics infrastructure should be further developed. As per many economists and beliefs, India is the new present and the future of the world, and we should start believing it and take actions. Not only make in India, but making India trade surplus.